Now, if you were here last week, you'll get the reason why this image is going up on the screen. But Kathleen Hughes came to me this morning and said, "Hey, James, look at this." This picture was given to a grade 1 class and the children were asked to suggest a headline. The winning entry was, "Never swallow your bubble gum." There you go. Definitive proof of why you shouldn't swallow chewing gum. If you don't get what I'm saying, you'll have to go online and listen to the sermon from last week. Anyway, we stopped our series in 1 Kings last week, and this week we begin a new series called Practicing the Way. And Natasha wanted me to share over the past month and a bit. She's been talking about a small group opportunity in the Practicing the Way material, where you can gather with others in a small group during the week to discuss this stuff further. John Mark Comer is the guy who wrote the book Practicing the Way. And he doesn't own copyright over that title, but when we talk about Practicing the Way, we're sort of referring to his material. And so Natasha just wanted me to let people know that she's already got 2 groups that are prepared to move ahead with that, and so it's probably full at the moment. But as we're going through this series, there's going to be 2 opportunities for you to respond and maybe take this further. One is going to be a half-day spiritual retreat that the pastors will be running, just here on a Saturday towards the end, just before Easter. We'll give further details as we go on with the series. But it's going to be an opportunity. Often you come to church, you hear what's said from the front, and maybe you follow it up. Maybe there's an opportunity to take it a little further in a conversation, but by the time you're home and you're getting on with your day, often it's forgotten and gone. We want to provide an opportunity with this stuff because it's really practical stuff we're talking about, to go, you know what, I'm going to take that next step and take everything I've heard and take it a bit further. So there's going to be that opportunity for that half-day retreat at the end of this series. Natasha also said she's very happy as well, if you want to take this stuff further, in next term to start another group. And so there will be that option as well. We'll talk more about that as we go on. But Practicing the Way, we love this series, the idea of it, primarily because it is so practical. And I want to start with a thought, and we're going to follow some logic here, some logical steps. I'm wanting you to agree to something, basically, that if I set it up front, you'd probably go, "Oh, I don't know if I agree with that." But by the time we follow the logical steps, we should all be going, "Actually, yeah, I think that is true. I think that is true." And we'll start with this, that it is fundamental to human nature that we grow. You agree with that? I mean, it's just part of what it means to be human, isn't it? That we mature, we grow, we develop. That the person I am in 10 years' time is not the person I am today. That is just what it means to be human. In fact, if you didn't grow, if you didn't develop, if you didn't mature at all, like that you sort of scratch your head and go, "What's wrong with you?" That's not what humans do. That's just how we go. And that doesn't stop once you stop being a child. Like, we think of the child, adolescent, teen years sort of as that time where, oh yeah, I'm growing and developing, and all of a sudden I'm an adult and then I've arrived. I'm sure as a child I thought that, like, just because physically I might have stopped growing. But we know as adults, you never stop growing and developing. It's just what it means to be human. It's part of our nature. And if we are people who grow and develop and mature over time, then there's a question of how we do that. What am I becoming? What is this thing I'm developing and growing into? And what is influencing me and helping to shape that person I'm becoming? This all makes sense. I'm sure you're not lost at this point. It's like, so that leads us to a statement that we've got to get our head around. If we're going to talk about this, that underpins everything we're going to be talking about. And I think, did I put it up here? No, not that. It's this, that everybody follows someone or at least something. Everybody follows someone or at least something. Now think about that for a moment. Because if I'd started by going, who do you follow? Who are you following? Yeah, there'd be lots of you going, what do you mean? I don't follow anybody. I'm my own person. I'm independent. I'm the captain of my ship. I steer my course. No one tells me what to do. I'm in control. I carve my own path. There's this messaging around us that reinforces constantly to us that we're independent, that you're a free thinker, that you are in control. I mean, are you familiar with that kind of messaging? It's, who would tell you what to do? That would be terrible if someone was telling you what to do. And so we like to think, in fact, we're told constantly, there's strong messaging that I don't follow anybody. I don't follow anybody. And yet if we are growing, if we are developing, if we're maturing into something we are not yet, then what is that something, and what is influencing what that something is? What is influencing that? Are we influenced at all? Now, you might push back and go, no, nothing at all. Everything I choose is me. And you can live in that fantasy world if you like. We might take it a step further and go, well, at the very least, we might acknowledge that we are products of our environment. And so the environment I find myself in, the people around me, the experiences, the pressures, the stress, the trials of life, maybe I'm shaped a little bit by that. I'll grant you that, James, that the external environment around me is probably influencing me a little bit. But am I following anybody? Absolutely not. I'm not. There's no one I'm setting my sights on and going, I'm going to listen to that person and be influenced by them. So you might grant that your experiences and your environment shape you a little bit. I find it interesting, though, lots that I'm reading at the moment. And I'll read a little bit from a guy called Jaron Lanier. Now, with a name like that, you might go, gee whiz, this guy's a bit of a Fruit Loop. If you saw pictures of him and heard him speak, you might think, yeah, this guy's definitely a conspiracy theorist, like he's a nutter. He wrote a book called 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now. And you even think with a book title like that, this guy's a bit of a conspiracy theorist nutter. He came out with a book and he was alarmed at what social media is doing. He would argue and suggest that the times we live in today are unlike any other times we have lived in. Let me read from his book a little bit. He says this. In fact, he will go as far as to say, not only are you influenced by people, but we may be more like trained dogs than we think we are. He says this: advertisers used to have a limited chance to make a pitch. And that pitch might have been sneaky or annoying, but it was fleeting. So pitch, an opportunity to sell you something. Furthermore, lots of people saw the same TV or print ad. It wasn't adapted to individuals. The biggest difference was that you weren't monitored and assessed all the time so that you could be fed dynamically optimised stimuli, whether content or ad to engage and alter you. So what he's saying is, advertisers used to just go, look, here's our one shot, here's an image, here's a slogan, boom, we'll put it out there, it's generic, it's for everyone, and whether people pick it up or not, well, I don't know, it's hit and miss. That's how advertising used to work. He goes on to say, though, that now everyone who is on social media is getting individualised, continuously adjusted stimuli without a break, so long as they use their smartphones. What might once have been called advertising must now be understood as continuous behaviour modification on a titanic scale. So advertising is no longer this sort of hit and miss thing. We've become sophisticated. We can target you. We can learn about you. And they will never know you specifically, but it knows enough about people like you. It knows enough about the type of person you are. And the type of person you are generally responds to this kind of stimuli. And we know if we hit you at this point in this time, if we know you're sitting in your home on your couch, and that's the time you most look at shopping and it's the most likely time you're going to buy things. That's the time we're going to bombard you with the things we want you to buy. Well, that's how it works nowadays. And there's no denying this. Twitter, Facebook, they freely admit, yes, our goal is to hook you. Our goal has been to make you addicted to our app. Why? Is it to make you a better person? Is it to improve your life? Is it to help you grow and develop and mature into the person you can be and should be? Or is it simply to grow their company and make money? These very same companies that admit now that yes, we deliberately try to get people addicted to our apps and our screens are the very same people who will also admit we have no idea the impact this is having on people. All we know is that we know for a fact we are changing behaviours. We are changing the way people interact. And no one's coming out saying we think that's good. Humans have used behavioural management modification techniques with animals for centuries. It's only in recent times we've learned, hey, we can apply those to humans, and guess what? It works. It works. We can get people to do things without them even knowing it through simple reward and punishment. And we invite it in our social apps all the time. Now, I'm not here beating up social apps and social media, and I'm not saying get off your social media. I think it's a good question to ask. Read the book if you're interested for more on that. What I am here to say is, though, you are deluded if you think you are not influenced by others. If you think that you are free to steer the course and the path of your life without being influenced by others. In fact, a New York Times columnist, Tish Harrison Warren, said, "None of us comes to what we believe by ourselves. The world has no free thinkers. We are all in a little petri dish with others." And in fact, we'd argue that's the way God's made us. As Christians, as we apply a Christian lens to this, and what I'm hoping through this series is that we can see that Christianity actually has stuff to offer in all areas of our life. That Jesus has something to offer in all areas of our life. John Mark Comer, when he wrote his book and was thinking about all this stuff, he writes this, and I have the quote up here. "If we are not being intentionally formed by Jesus himself, then it's highly likely that we are being unintentionally formed by someone or something else." And again, if we can't come to grips with that, then anything else we do in the coming weeks isn't really going to hit home. Because unless we stop and see that I have a choice to make, and if I just go, well, you know what, I'm not going to make an intentional decision to follow Jesus. If we don't understand that, unless I do that, I will be unintentionally led by others. If we don't come to grips with that, then there's going to be no impetus in you, no drive in you, no sort of urgency to go, you know what, I really need to make a decision, do something about this. If we're not being intentionally formed by Jesus himself, then it's highly likely that we are being unintentionally formed by someone or something else. Now, this should come as no shock to us. Those who have a Christian worldview should already know this and be familiar with it. The Bible talks about it from beginning to end. We can go right back to the very beginning. When God first sort of gives us something in writing and goes, right, here you go. You want some rules to live by? Here are the rules, the 10 Commandments. If we go back to Exodus 20 and have a look there, and we can look back at the very first commandment he gives. The very one, if you're going to live, this is the number one thing I want you to know. The number one commandment is this: you must have no other God but me. Now, what does that imply? Why is it number one? What does it imply? It's number one first and foremost because there is a God. He is all-powerful. He created you with a purpose. The purpose is to share life with him and be engaged with him. And so he says, look, you've got to get this thing right, first of all. I am God, have no other gods but me. But what's the implication in this commandment? The implication is it's going to be really easy for you not to worship me. It's going to be really easy for you to replace me with something else. It will be easy. In fact, I know it's going to happen, so I need to tell you, make sure you keep this command. You need to work at this. Have no other gods but me, because you will chase after other things. You will let other things control and have influence over you. You will put your trust in other things besides me. As Christians in the worldview, we're familiar with this. This shouldn't come as any great shock to us that we either choose God or other things. Romans 12:1-2 says in the New Testament, "And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. Don't copy the behaviour and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you'll learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect." There is always these competing elements in our life. You can be drawn to God, you can choose God, you can intentionally follow God and his ways, or you can be drawn to the world and things that are not of God. It's a choice. It's always been presented to us as Christians as a choice, something we need to intentionally choose. And to think, well, no, I'm just not going to play that game. God, I'm not going to have you as God, and I'm not going to replace you with any other. I'll just be my own individual person. Even that there is making you God. I remember seeing a speech once by, I've forgotten his name. McConaughey, what's his first name? Matthew McConaughey, the actor. He's a handsome guy with a southern drawl, American accent, and he won an award. And in his awards speech, he said, people say, who do I follow? He said, well, who inspires me? And he said, I had an old mentor ask me that, someone I respected. And he said, you know what, I don't know. Let me think about that. And so he came back a few weeks later and he said, I thought about who inspires me, who I seek to emulate and follow. And he said, it's me in 10 years' time. That's what I'm seeking. Me in 10 years' time. That's my goal. I said, and the fact I will never achieve that, because in 10 years' time, then it'll be the me in 10 years' time after that, And I'm sort of listening to it, and there's part of me going, there's something really attractive about that. There's something nice about that. He's seeking to improve himself and be better all the time, and he's reflecting and thinking about the person he wants to be, and he can visualise it, and he's intentional, purposeful, and it seems like a good thing. And everyone in the crowd claps and cheers at the end of his speech, going, that's the greatest thing I've ever heard. In fact, the tagline on the video for it was, one of the greatest motivational speeches ever. And all I'm thinking is, that's your God? Like, you? It's just this flying the flag of independence that, let me loose and I will become the greatest person that's ever lived. And go, really? Really? When's that ever worked? And then you step back for a little bit and go, don't tell me, Matthew McConaughey, that you're not shaped by the environment you're in, that you're not playing the game and trying to be what other people want you to be. Like, who are you kidding? Of course you're not steering your ship and carving your own path. You are being influenced. The question is, who is influencing you? Who do you trust? Who are you following? What we're going to do over the next few weeks is make this proposition that Jesus is the best option for you to follow. Do I get an amen to that? There's a few people going, yep, absolutely, I agree with that. I mean, I hope you're on board with that already. I'm talking to the converted here. But there's a fascinating story by Dallas Willard that I came across. Dallas Willard, he's a famous writer, pastor, writer, very pastoral, very big in spiritual formation, and he was invited by a Christian university to come and talk to their faculty at the start of the year. And so you've got a room full of professors and academics and from all different fields, like across the university. So you've got maths and chemistry and the sciences, you've got engineers, you've got language and arts. Like there's just people from all different areas of expertise in the room. And he leads them, and one of the main things he wanted to get across to them is, hey guys, you shouldn't be too worried about what I've got to say to you today. What you really need to be worried about and concerned about is what Jesus has to say to you. If Jesus was standing here right now, what would he say to you here? And as he was talking with them, he said, I asked them this because I wanted to sort of give them a hint. Like, this is maybe one of the things Jesus would say to you if he was here. And he said this, and I'll quote exactly what he said. He said this, he said, what if Jesus stood here today and said this to you? Why don't you respect me in your various fields of study and expertise? Why don't you recognise me as master of research and knowledge in your fields? Now, he goes on to share that some of the people there, a lot of people were like, they were with him. They're like, yeah, you're right. Like, Jesus is the master and a researcher and the master and expert in my field. Of course he is. Others were a bit unsure of what he was saying. Quite a number responded with, are you serious? This idea that Jesus is master of fields such as algebra, economics, business, administration, or French literature, like that simply had not crossed their minds. Simply not crossed their minds. It's like, sure, Jesus is a nice mythical figure. He's a good guy. He's a good teacher. He's a good representative of God. He was a good sacrifice. Like, you put him in his box and go, yeah, Jesus achieved all that well. But you know what? That has very little to do with my world, my things that I focus on, because I never heard Jesus talk about French literary classics. So he must know nothing about it. And yet he puts it to them. Do you not think that Jesus has something to offer you in all aspects of your life? Why do you not consult him? He then goes on to say this, that his observation of this, his reflection, was that in our culture and among Christians as well, Jesus Christ is automatically disassociated from brilliance or intellectual capacity. Not one in 1,000 will spontaneously think of him in conjunction with words such as well-informed, brilliant, or smart. But what if Jesus was the most brilliant person to have lived? I don't know if that question was posed to you. I guess it is being posed to you. Is Jesus the most brilliant person you've seen? Or is he disassociated from that in your world? He's a great saviour. He's great at forgiving sins. But do I think of him as brilliant? Do I think of him as a fantastic mind? Do I think of him as someone who thought deeply about all aspects of life? Do the things he shares, as the words he shared with his disciples back then and that we have today, are these words that are given by someone so profoundly brilliant that they can actually have an impact on my life today? Or have we just boxed Jesus over here and gone, yep, there you stay? We're going to suggest that Jesus is the most qualified person to follow. If we ask the question, who do you follow? I want that answer to be Jesus. I mean, who else would there? One of the most profound things I think about Jesus, one of the things that qualifies him most, is the fact that Besides Jesus, how many other people throughout history have actually said, "Come, follow me"? Who's actually put their hand up? Who's had the guts to say, "I am worth following"? Now there have been others. We can think of most world religions. They would have people at the top of those that sort of led the way and said, "Hey, come do as I do." There certainly have been others. But when I look to Jesus, I can't help but think that no one is more qualified for that job than him. If we look at the life he lived, just the moral excellence, the quality of the life, of the relationships, of the way he served and put others, no one can criticise the way Jesus lived. No one can criticise his teachings either. In them we find some of the most profound, in fact, thousands of years later, we're still studying, we're still wrestling with the words of Jesus, applying them to our life. Because in them we find life, in them we find truth, in them we find insight into who we are, into the way the world works, into human relationships. He is profound in his teaching. And then in the things he promises. No one else promises the things he promises. And that's not just a promise of eternal life. Again, this is boxing Jesus in, going, okay, Jesus is really good for making sure I get into heaven. That's what Jesus is good for. He died for my sins so I can go be with God forever. Amen. Like that true, yes, tick the box, yep. That's great. But he came to bring life and life to its fullest. Your heaven starts now. Like your life with God starts now, not when you die and go to heaven. It is now. And God promises abundant life. What he offers us is a way to live, a way to live. And that's why it's called practicing the way. Do you think, as Jesus says, "Come follow me," he doesn't give us any idea of what it looks like to follow him, of some of the things that we need to do in order to say we follow Jesus? Of course he does. And over the coming weeks, that's what we'll be looking at. I had started prepping this sermon by looking at a whole heap of ways that Christians have been faithful throughout the centuries. Like, what does it take for a Christian to be faithful and thriving now in our century compared to last century or the century before that, or modern, medieval, dark ages, early centuries, however far back you want to go? What does it take to be a faithful Christian in those different times? Does it take more? Certainly the pressures on us, the influences on us are different than they've ever been. But what does that look like in our day and age to live lives that follow Jesus, that are thriving? That's what we're going to be looking at. So I'm sorry if you're visiting with us, and you get to read up. We're touching, and we're not completely just using Practicing the Way, John Mark Comer's material. We'll go elsewhere. But if you want to follow it up, then by all means chase up his material, or you can tune in and log on online and see what happens over the coming weeks here and journey with us. But we're going to spend some time now in communion. Jesus is the reason we gather. Jesus is why we call ourselves Christians, followers of Christ. Jesus is our hope. He is our salvation. He is the way, the truth, and the life. We could talk on and on and on about who Jesus is. But we're going to take some time now. And remember at the start I was talking about how in sermons often you don't get to respond. It's sort of like a passive listening thing. This is our chance to respond. And so